Right, so hello everybody, welcome to my Brain Tap webinar. This is the first webinar I've done on this topic. You know, I do like my electronic gadgets. There's some all kinds of healing things. In fact, I must go back to my old website really. I had one called healingdevices.com. Haven't been there for, I don't know, getting on for 10 years, although I've kept the domain going. Anyway, tonight we're going to be talking about brain fitness, as you see. It's a new concept, particularly floated by my guest tonight. I think it's a great idea, actually. And, you know, we need to look after our brains just as much as we look after our bodies. Okay, and it went off again. There we go. Right. So, didn't work. Okay, never mind. I'll go back to the mouse, but you'll find that the mouse jumps around, so it could be a bit annoying to all of us, really. We shall see. But anyway, this is the concept, okay? We jog, we exercise for physical fitness. We know that's important. If your heart and lungs are not efficient and you don't keep your body on the move, you deteriorate quite significantly. But unfortunately, a lot of people don't take their brain and mental functions that seriously. They think they are what they are and never think of working out in something like a mind gym. You know, they don't exercise their brain in the way that a person would do physically. This is very ironic. In the last 2 years, we've probably entered, apart from wartime anyway, we've entered the most stressful period in the history of the human race. Everyone is feeling these stressful events of the present. And it's not good. So, you know, our brains, we can't afford to neglect them and leave them running on empty or anything like that. So this is what this is meant to address. Okay, I'm sorry, a slightly bumpy start tonight, but my equipment isn't working as it should. Well, now here, obviously it goes without saying that brain fitness isn't the same in the same nature as physical fitness. It's different. But it is important to understand that they both can be developed by activity and use. You know, if you use your brain more, and it can be in very subtle ways, not necessarily doing crosswords and math puzzles and things like that. We can actually, well, as you'll learn during the course of the webinar, we can poke and prompt your brain to do things that it wouldn't particularly think of doing normally, but which are very important for brain health. And it's important to say that just like a muscle, the brain can be made stronger and more efficient by the right kind of intelligent exercise and development. And that's what we're going to be talking about, hence the term brain fitness, really. Okay, so we'll start. We're going to be talking about brain, and there are certain parts of society that think, therefore, that means it's medical and nobody else is allowed to talk about brains, even though we've all got one. You know the kind of bodies I'm talking about. Anyway, so it's very important to do this disclaimer. I have to tell you legally that nothing I'm going to say here has been evaluated by the FDA. And what I'm going to share with you, there's a lot, my guest too, Patrick, we're going to share, none of this is supposed to diagnose, cure, or prevent disease. You've got to consider this a purely educational webinar, an educational phenomenon. Okay. Now, we're talking about the device, the Brain Tap. I know I shared a picture and the word with you in the email, so nothing surprising here. And we're going to work on this, like the things it could do. What could change in your life as a result of learning to use a device like this and letting it do its amazing stuff? Simple things, a more positive outlook in life. And yeah, that's important. You know, even me, I'm a cheerful person normally, but I think me and people around me, it's very difficult to stay buoyant on top when you can see the world going to hell in a handbasket. And it's not a medical thing. Yeah, I mean, there are some medical loonies around there, but it seems to me it's all been grabbed and co-opted by the politicians who are playing their own games. You know, guys don't even have a first aid certificate. They're telling us what to do, that we must get vaccinated, that we can't go here, we must wear that, and all these things. And it's really been grabbed by politicians, I've got to say. Okay, we can improve your memory. Now, a lot of my subscribers and followers I know are of the slightly older age group, as indeed I am myself. But let me make it clear that you can improve memory. You know, it's not a given. You're not fixed, not stuck with memory. Even a person with, incipient dementia that's suffering with memory problems, they can be crystallized and helped, definitely. There's all kinds of mental health disorders, of which anxiety and depression will just be a couple, you know, obsessive compulsive disorder, all kinds of things. But certainly the main ones are anxiety, which is being overstimulated, and depression, which I suppose is being understimulated, you know, up or it's down. We can boost the immune system. The immune system takes a very large part of its cues from state of mind and what the person's thinking or doing with themselves. So we can reduce stress so that, you know, we feel better. The stress or the circumstances don't change, but the person's response to the stress will change, and that's important. So we can release stress by changing a person's perception of it, not just, you know, if let's say the person's going bankrupt, we don't arrive in a van and pay all the money and all the debts are gone. You obviously know that's not what I mean. But a person can relax through really what's quite a tough process. Hey, I nearly lost all my money once about 30 years ago. I won't go into all the circumstances, but I remember walking down the street and thinking, hey, you know, a bank's not going to let the average person lose $250,000 or $500,000. They wouldn't let you get into that state. So I've done something. I've arrived at a state where I lost a large amount of money due to some stupid decisions. But, you know, fortunately survived it, of course, and so on. Simple health things, we can help with weight issues, you know, comfort eating. We all know what that means. We all know that a lot of overeating and overweight is just simply the person isn't happy, and it's a solution. In fact, you could broaden that to addictions, as I've said here, all things. People are doing things because they don't feel good. And this is the day and age of sort of anxiety coupled with addictions. You know, people are using alcohol, sugar, caffeine, street drugs, medical drugs, all of these things are all sort of chemical solutions to try and get the person through. And of course, most of them are not really very healthy solutions, let's face it. Okay, so let's just do a bit of housekeeping before we dive in there. If you find you're having any technical issues, usually if you just click reconnect, sorry, that's enough. It'll just bring you back on. You know, if you click off, it doesn't mean we're not going to go away. The webinar is still happening. And then you click yourself back in as you did when you first joined. You're free to use the chat for messages, but please be polite to one another and stay on topic. You know, I don't want some sudden questions about, you know, my father's got stage 3, you know, what can he do? I don't want that kind of thing. I want it to be relevant to what we're talking about. And for those who have come on later, I'll repeat what I said just before I started the recording, which is we will answer questions, that's a promise, but not until the end. Let's finish the presentation first. Excuse me. The main reason is we don't want to spoil the flow of information. It's all planned and centered around a bunch of slides that took me a long while to assemble. The other thing, and the obvious thing, is that we might answer your question anyway. So if you just stay patiently until the end, you might find your questions answered. And if it's not, you can ask it. Now, there's 2 ways to ask questions. If you hover along the bottom of your screen, you'll see a bunch of icons. One is labeled Q&A. Just click on that and it will open a box in which you type your question. The other thing to do is do chat, okay? There's a chat box. If you click on that, it will open up and enable you to chat. Now, everyone will see that if you do the chat box. And I'm going to ask you actually just now to respond. I'm hoping that everyone can clear, that you can hear me loud and clear, says Maria. That's good. Yes, but my guest is just waiting in the wings for the moment. Somebody's concerned about that. Don't worry, he's there. He's relaxed, he's totally chilled and letting me get on with it for the moment. Okay, so I'm jumping around. Sorry, I didn't mean to do that. I'm going to introduce my guest in a minute, but who am I? 99% of you I know will know who I am. But in case you've shared with a friend and a friend of a friend, who is this dude sitting here spieling on about brain fitness? Well, basically, I'm a British trained doctor. We have a degree, 2 degrees there, not an MD. The degrees are called Bachelor of Medicine and Bachelor of Surgery. It's the equivalent, well, actually, probably slightly better training than the American MD. I mean, American MDs, they get that degree and then they go out and learn medicine. But I've got 4 international degrees, including an MD. I'm a homeopathic doctor. I've got a diploma in homeopathy. I've been professor at 2 minor universities. That's not important. Not like Harvard professor or anything to show off about. I was labeled back in the 80s and 90s the world's #1 allergy detective because of my work in food allergies and the strange things that you uncover, you know, like a boy that had epilepsy when he ate carrots or anything in the carrot family. That took some figuring out, I'll tell you, and it's really remains one of my most amazing cases. But it just shows you what can happen, and if you don't have the right way to access the solution, the remedy, you're never going to help. The person's just going to end up with drugs. But I've got pretty good at running down things, hence the expression, the #1 allergy detective. I've written books. My website is alternative-doctor, that's doctor spelled in full, alternative-doctor.com. It's a free resource. There's thousands of pages up there. And I live in Las Vegas, which is where I'm talking to you from tonight. Also have a place in France. And when it warms up a bit over there, I dare say we'll be getting in touch with you from France as well. Okay, so we want to talk about stress. Stress has been called the silent killer, meaning it's not obvious. You know, you can be stressed, but you're not really, you know, you're in denial, you're not really facing things, but all the while it's chipping and chewing away at your health. And that, I think, is the most dangerous part of stress. You know, people feel, oh, well, you know, life's just, life's a bit, you know, the old saying, you're born, life's a bitch, and then you die. It's kind of, for some people, it's like that. Things don't go well, but very subtly and very silently, it can be chewing away at your strongest asset, which is your health. And the thing is, it tends to go to the weakest point. You know, people are different. Some people, they get headaches, so they have terrible migraines whenever they're stressed, or typically just after the stress ends, bang, out come all the headaches. Somebody else, it might be indigestion. You know, their guts are absolutely rotten. They feel belly aches and off their food if they're stressed. It's different for different people. But it's a very, very big, widespread phenomenon. And the National Institutes of Health reckon up to 90% of all illnesses related to stress. Now, stress can affect your genes, so that multiplies the possibilities for damage even more. It's been said in many ways, it's one of the most pervasive maladies of our time. Well, you know, that might pre-COVID, yes, but now with COVID, we are definitely living through pervasive, stressful malady time, the overload caused by the pandemic and caused by all the baloney and hogwash that we're being subject to as a result. What happens is if the brain's constantly thrust and heavily stressed, it goes out of balance. And the most important balance in our bodies is called sympathetic to parasympathetic balance. This is the autonomic nervous system that runs everything on automatic. It looks after you in, you know, the best way it knows how. But if it gets out of balance, especially if there's too much sympathetic, you know, that's the flight or fight response, severe damage can eventually result. So it's important. I'd just like to introduce here my own. This is a great workable definition of stress. And if you think about it, it's amusing but clever. It's the difference between what you've got and what you wanted. If you wanted to be a millionaire and you're broke, that's not very happy. But if you are broke and you wanted to be like Mother Teresa and just work on the streets of Calcutta, being broke isn't going to stress you up as much. So it's the bigger the gap between what you want and what you've got is the degree of stress. And of course, we've all got something we don't want, which is lockdowns, businesses and restaurants and shops all closing down because they're being punished and stress themselves and abuse. This is not good. So it definitely falls in my definition of what is stress anyway. Now, oops, here we go again. So, yeah, okay. There we go, right, because there's an important point here. Stress, I divide stress up into 2 kinds. There's personalized stress, what you feel, you as a person, caused by what you're doing, you know, your bad lifestyle, your bad choices, bad decisions, whatever. But there's also this phenomenon that I call global stress. We're all subject to global, worldwide threats, things like pandemics, Asteroid collision, you know, you've heard about that one. Every time there's something comes within 50 million miles of Earth, the media said, oh, you know, close flyby by an asteroid, you know, better take cover. They love to panic these things. Volcanic night is one that doesn't get talked about perhaps enough. It can be very sudden. In fact, it can be overnight, and it can cause real trouble in the planet. Listen, it can lead to global cooling and another ice age within a matter of days. And we never know when these things are going to happen. Economic meltdowns, I mean, those are obvious. Our country and businesses and economies are being managed by basically idiots. There could be war, acts of terrorism. It's all very upsetting, and it's difficult to deal with, isn't it? So we're all subject to stress. Here's a survey that was done in the USA. This was before COVID. This was 2018, no, 2007, this one. 32%, a third of people were reporting extreme stress. They were really finding it heavy going. Nearly 1 in 5 people, that's 17% the actual, reach their highest stress level 15 or more days per month. That's half the time. Half of the month they're at peak stress levels. Ouch. More than 3 out of 4 participants, that's 77%, said that within the previous month they'd had physical problems due to stress. Now, one of my sayings, an important teaching, is when you get your symptoms, that's not when it starts. It starts long before the symptoms. And when your body cannot compensate anymore, your poor old body's gone, just about given up. That's the point when the symptoms appear. But that's very late on if you think about it. Right, and 73% reported stress-related psychological symptoms. So not just, you know, belly aches and headaches and things, but the obvious not feeling good things, being irritable, angry, nervous, tired, feeling on the verge of tears and losing sleep, eating badly. All kinds of bad things happen to you when you're subject to continuous stress, trust me. Right, so yeah, so these are some of the outcomes of stress. I mean, there are lots more. I could go on and on and on, but some obvious ones: high blood pressure, heart disease, the risk of heart attacks or strokes, cancer. There's still no end of doctors argue it's got nothing to do with it. It's all genes. It doesn't matter what you eat. It doesn't matter what stress you're under. Of course it matters. If you know the work of Dr. Hamer, the German doctor, you'll know that virtually every cancer has some triggering stressful episode in a person's life. Diabetes and obesity or eating, these are very common. They're big things that a lot of people are suffering from. In fact, a survey in the USA, only 12% of people were fully healthy on the obesity, metabolic health, blood sugar scale. The other 80% had one or more markers for serious illness and dysfunction. It can reflect on your sex life, gastrointestinal conditions. We all know your guts are probably the first thing that starts to feel off when, you know, there's something wrong. It's very often a response in the gut. And then, as I said, mental health problems of all kinds, anxiety and depression being the worst and the commonest. But yeah, anything to do with self-worth, you know, the person does not feel good about themselves. Stress can literally shrink your brain. So I hope you're all listening as of this point for something that's going to help. Stress plays a major part in all illness, and your brain, in fact, it's got its fingers in everything. You know, it's connected to our entire bodies through this network of nerves, and yet whatever's going on, your brain is in there somewhere, either causing it, trying to manage it, or at least recording it and going, yeah, we should stop this. You need to drastically reduce stress starting today. And that's what this next slide is about. I'm going to introduce the Brain Tap. It's an amazing device. I've got one, and you can see pretty well what it is. It's a set of headphones with something like a visor. And in fact, what's going on under that visor is lovely flashing lights at certain brain frequencies. That's very powerful. It's called photic driving, and it's extremely powerful. So as you said, you learned from the email, I'm going to be talking about that device. There's almost nothing it can't do to calm, refresh, heal, de-stress, and empower you. It can put you into deep sleep mode at bedtime. If you're tired and run down in the afternoon, you can put on a session and boom, it energizes you and you wake up with lots of energy to get right through to the end of the day. You can use it in all kinds of creative ways like that. Now, the secret to this, we're going to go into more detail, but the secret, for those of you who may not know it, is changing the brainwave frequencies that are going on inside your brain. No matter if you think you're a non-material soul that's out there, you still have a brain, and this brain is your interface with the physical reality. And you can either interface it in a calm, relaxed way, those are called alpha waves, you know, looking inward and perceiving things inside, not paying so much attention to the outside world. Delta frequencies are about deep, refreshing sleep. That's all good, we need that. Beta waves or beta frequencies, this is high performance. If it goes too high, you start to get jagged a little bit, but it's excitement, busy, you know, on top of things, keeping appointments, making all the phone calls. To do all of that kind of thing, you need to be in a beta state. So your brain needs to be really fired up and ready for the job. And then there's a fourth important, well, there are five, but I'm going to leave one of them till later for my friend Patrick to introduce to you. But my favorite, theta waves. These are about, you know, 5, 6, 8 cycles per second. And this is the brainwave frequencies of trance, dreaming, visions of other worlds and other dimensions, out-of-body experiences, all that magical, marvelous, mystical stuff. But don't think, you know, it's just for the wackos and the woo-woos. We all go through theta twice a day. As you're going downwards to sleep, you pass through alpha, get more and more drowsy through theta, quite sleepy, and oh, you could still wake up. If somebody comes into the room, you will wake up, say hello, even in theta, but then you'll go down into delta, and that's deep sleep. But we do it in reverse. Coming up next morning, we go through theta, and it's lovely, you know, that magical, you know, like warm feeling. You want to stay wrapped in the downy and feels really nice. Oh, do I really have to get up today? You know, that kind of feeling. That's the theta state, the theta trance state. And as I said, it's one of my faves. It's lovely. Now, tonight we're going to dump the old brain model. It's been around for donkey's years, and it's just categorically wrong. For a start, they said, you know, once you lose your brain cells, you never get them back. That's found out to be completely bunk. You know, eventually somebody caught brain waves dividing and multiplying and replacing themselves. It was here, actually, California, La Jolla University, down in Del Mar. They caught brain cells multiplying. But the idea that we're fixed, you know, we're stuck with whatever we got from genetics and our limited brain function and imperfect IQ, tough titty, you're stuck with it, that's it. Not science. They claimed it was science. It's exactly the opposite of science, which is complete baloney that's being passed around, but is simply not true. We now understand that you can access your brain, train it, bring it on stream. You can make it grow, literally. You can grow and enlarge parts of your brain by using it in certain ways. So the trick, of course, is to give your brain the right things to work with. And that's where brainwave frequency entrainment and changes come. And you can produce major alterations in function, state of mind in as little as 20 minutes. It's been said, it's a bit cruel, but you know, you don't need to do 30, 40 years of meditation. You can have the whole result in 10 minutes, just switch a machine on and stick it on your head. There's a lot of truth to that, right? A lot of truth. All right, so time to go on and introduce my guest now, the inventor of this wonderful device, Dr. Patrick. He's quite an entrepreneur. He's a few years ago was running the biggest, largest self-help franchise chain and was very sought after, still is. But he's an author of many works and many books. As you can see, I'll leave you to look at those and read them. But he's a very special person. He's one of the kindest and gentlest people I know, even though he's a complete total smartass. But you know how horribly arrogant these people can be, and he's not. He's just lovely. Patrick, welcome. Thanks for coming on board.
Thanks for having me, Keith. That's great to be here.
You're always welcome. Okay, so again, you told me about this thing, and it worked, but it now won't work. Of course, it's the.
I think if you click in on the PowerPoint, it will. If you
Yeah.
click with your mouse on the PowerPoint in the
Well,
background, then it'll work.
I'll give it one more try. Okay. It's getting, first of all, it's getting the green light to stay
Yeah,
on.
should be
It
working.
goes
Yeah.
off. So no, forget it.
Oh,
I don't want to
maybe
keep
the
people
batteries.
waiting. I'll just struggle with the struggle with the mouse. Anyway, so that's you. So, like I said, these are, well, in fact, you can, let's just talk about these together, Patrick. As you know, these is probably the most stressful peace times ever. Anyone who isn't feeling stressed by what's going on is dead. They're not alert to what's being done to our world and social order and these things. So we all need to disconnect from some of the craziness. Stopping watching the news is obvious, isn't it?
They say that if our grandparents were around, they would have maybe 4 or 5 stressful events a week. Now people have that before dinner, right? Because they have their cell phones, and then they don't have enough stress. They go turn on the news. I always tell people, if you're too happy, there's a solution for that. Just turn on CNN, and you'll immediately begin to be depressed. I mean, we need to know what's happening, of course, but when you become consumed by it, the hope is a big deal to the brain. And if you lose hope, you shut down and you don't function at your highest level.
Right. But I mean, you do need to know what's going on, but CNN is not the way to find out what's going on. They just make it up, they spin it, and often you go 180 degrees in reverse to what they say, and you've got what's really happening. Giving social media a rest has got to be something good. Just don't go. I mean, 2 weeks, 4 weeks, if you can stand it. I learned today, and I believe it's true, that you can just turn off your account. You don't have to delete your account and lose all your friends and contacts, but you just sort of put in a sort of pending or reserve state. I hope that's true anyway, and I hope some of you try it, because there's quite a lot, what do they call it? Trolling, trolling on social media, where people are going around looking for people to insult and abuse and say, you dumb jerk, what do you know? And even people who are friends, or at least they can come onto your page and say things about you. But look, I don't know what, we talked very briefly about this one, email bankruptcy. It wasn't my idea, but it's brilliant. And I did do it once, which is just highlight all your emails and delete the lot, empty your inbox of all past emails. If that's really a bit challenging for you, how about going back, say, 30 days or 3 months, 90 days, just everything before that. There's very, very little likely to have any negative impact on your life if you just dump it. And so I think declaring email bankruptcy is going to be one of the star ones, Patrick, don't you?
Yes.
Did you try it? I can't remember what you said the other day. Have you done it?
Well, I actually tell people that it could be up to 3 days before I do that, because you get sucked in. It's kind of like YouTube, right? You get on one YouTube, next thing you know, it's 2 hours and you're watching cats play with knitting balls, and you don't know what the heck you're doing there. And it's like, so with that, what happens with email is I actually have assistant that does most of my email, thank God, but there are things I have to handle. And I just tell people, in the old days, you could pick up the phone and actually talk to people. I prefer to do that as much as possible and run my business. I mean, you probably remember, like I did, I used to be able to lock the door of your office, go home, and nobody bothered you the next day unless they had an emergency, right? Now, when you're global, you get calls from all over the world, or you get texts from all over the world, emails from all over the world, and you've got to have boundaries. I love the way people do. Some people will have on their email returns, they say, I answer my emails between this time and this time and this time and this time, 2 times a day, and that's it. And then, because the expectation is, if I send you an email, you're going to answer it, right? And that's not always true. So I think this is a great way to do it. Declare email bankruptcy. I like that term.
I think we'll try and popularize it. Yeah. Another good thing to get rid of stress is go for a walk in nature. I think most people would have heard of forest bathing. If you haven't, it's a Japanese idea, but just going out among the trees. But you don't just walk through the wood. You stroll really, really slowly and feel, smell and look around. To walk a quarter of a mile, a half a mile, you take an hour over that. It's not just trotting through the wood. That's not going to work.
Right. And they know that you can actually, your brain, the most powerful pharmacy on earth, is then going to work for you, because they show how your neurotransmitters, those positive neurotransmitters, and the cortisol levels go down just by walking in nature. So, I mean, it's a beautiful thing, to get out there.
It is. You could do direct relaxation techniques, everybody knows about or has tried or heard of, at least, Tai Chi and yoga and all those things. But listen, just this last line, one of the best de-stressing activities of all. And I'm talking about de-stressing, and I'm talking about a scientific study. They measured all kinds of parameters, you know, like cortisol, other things. And you know what? I wonder if anyone will guess, but the best thing of all was, you know, it wasn't sitting chilling, it wasn't going for a walk or a stroll, it was reading a book. Just, you know, and if you think about it, you know, to be taking in symbols, you've got to concentrate a little bit, otherwise you're not reading at all. And just as a way of shutting out the outside world for half an hour, read a book. Great. Okay, now, oh, it's gone again. See what I mean?
Gotta go back one.
While you talk, I shall try and fix this.
Herbert Benson. They don't want Herbert Benson on there.
Brain tap an hour ago, so I'm not too stressed with it. But tell us who this man is. I know you know.
Herbert Benson is probably one of the best known people out there in the world of stress, because he showed that we also have a super state, which we have the relaxation response. So everybody before him was always talking about we either fight or flee, but there's a higher state of activity, which this relaxation response means that you can learn to operate. We can't eliminate stress. I mean, it'd be great if you had a seminar where you could just send magic potions to everybody's home and they could wave it in there like fairy dust and no more stress. But what we really want is a better capacity to handle stress. And what Herbert Benson proved was you can build that capacity to handle your life, even in the most stressful situations, instead of having to flee or fight. You can actually rise above that and actually operate on a higher level because you have the capacity to do so.
Right. Now he called, see, it worked this time. He actually called that the relaxation response, didn't he? And it's the direct opposite of fight and flight. You do a relaxation response in it again. So this is very important. Talk us through this.
Yeah. Well, part of it is most people don't realize that we had the thing about weight loss earlier. When we were in People magazine, we had over 100 people we sent them that lost half their weight and kept it off for more than 5 years. And we said, you don't realize it, but when you down-regulate and you increase your brainwave activity in this alpha theta range you were talking about, you actually boost your metabolism. Your body goes online and starts working better. So, but when you're stressed out, it decreases that. You know, stress is more fattening than chocolate. That was one of my favorite articles I've ever written. It's got probably the most.
I like it.
So you know, your liver produces as much sugar as a candy bar when you get stressed out. So some people say, I don't need any candy. I can't believe I'm overweight. Well, it's not what you're eating, it's what's eating you. So that's part of what we have to work on, right? So when we talk about this relaxation response too, if you can think about decision making, when you're stressed, your body is looking to flee. So immediately, for those that understand that, the blood leaves those part of the body like the digestive system, and we have a thinking gut. So if our gut isn't thinking because it doesn't have oxygen and blood flow and circulation, then basically all we do is we pell-mell through the jungle. We're, you know, like we're being chased by a tiger or something. The other is that we know that stress actually can affect over 2,000 gene expressions. So just being stressed out, there's something called psychoimmunology, which simply means, for those that aren't medical doctors out there, it simply means that your psychology affects your immune system. What you know, when they came out with the ads for during the spring, when it talks about you know, different substances in the air, you know, and you have that reaction to histamines and things like that, they showed those spores. They sold more of the antihistamine than ever before. All they do is show the commercials, because people freaked out when they saw the spores in the air. So our brain does a lot with that. So when we think about the body and what it produces, this nitric oxide, blood flow, circulation, you know, when we're stressed, we don't have vasodilation. We have the exact opposite. You know, we don't have blood flow to the extremities. So people that have like neuropathy, there's a direct correlation between the onset neuropathy and also with high stress situations. Most people out there, Keith, don't realize it, but they are operating in chronic low-level stress. So their body's basically locked up. We call it sympathetic escape, because their body is trying to escape from the stress. It's not, so we need to get them into that relaxation response instead of that stress response. We call that the thriving brain instead of the surviving brain. And we need to teach people how to unlock that.
Right. So just let's anticipate a teeny bit. I mean, you know, you can sit in a chair, you can listen to beautiful music, you can relax. But we've got the perfect device for generating the relaxation response, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, I call this multimedia sensory stimulation. I'm not too sure whether you agree with me or not, but the
Oh,
point
no,
is,
I like it.
there are different ways of causing this stimulation. The most widely known is binaural beats, and I'll leave you to explain what that is in a minute. And that certainly is, highly workable technology, but photic driving or flickering lights, actually more so. And what I like to say to people, and I've heard you say it, Patrick, but if you imagine, lying on the rug by the fire, we don't do it anymore now, it's electric fires. But in the old days when you had a nice log fire, you would just dream and just pass off into this relaxed state. It was wonderful. And I used to joke, it's not carbon monoxide poisoning because it still works outdoors or by the campfire. If you're out in the wild woods, it still works. It's the flickering lights effect. We also can add soothing music. That's calming in its own right. Everybody knows that. Slow Baroque music is very popular. And the Mozart effect is the other way. That will brighten people up. I've forgotten his name, the man that did the acoustic ear. A Frenchman, Alfred, somebody. Anyway, he said a bit of Mozart is as good as 2 cups of coffee. It'll sharpen you up mentally. And then, of course, I call them creative mind walks. I've been listening to some of yours. I mean, we both do them, but, yours are very good too, where you're taking a person from here, walking them to over there, using verbal descriptions, see yourself walking down a flight of stairs, now in the mind's library and so on. Put all of these 4 things together and produce fantastic transformation in how a person's thinking and feeling in just a matter of minutes. Anyway, as I said, it's down to brainwaves. So just walk us through these.
Okay. So you've given a pretty good definition, but I'm gonna kind of rehearse it a little bit differently here, or have people go through a little bit differently. When we think about beta, think of that as your reactionary mind. And it's good for problem solving like we have here. It's the one that if we don't have that, you're driving down the highway and you don't know how you got from one place to the other. That's because beta might reduce because you're doing a repetitive task and you kind of go, some people call it brain dead, but you never really go brain dead. You're just shift the energy in the brain. And so we need a good amount of beta. So when I talk about these brain waves, no brain waves any more important than other. They're more state dependent than they are like a universal brainwave. But an average person who has a functioning normalized brain would be using about 45% beta while they're awake. Hopefully on this webinar, that's what they're doing. Alpha is a really cool state that every one of us gets into, like when talking about sitting in front of the fire. And each one of these, by the way, is also linked to neurotransmitter production. There's 54 different neurotransmitters, and the body doesn't know when to create them until the brain tells the gut what to do, because 97% of them are made in the gut. So like beta is dopamine. That's why people have the addictions in beta, and they get locked in. And that's what you were saying, like having that email bankruptcy or even text messaging, when you get a text message and you send it out and you want that return, as soon as they return, you get a big smile on your face. That's a dopamine hit. You don't have to be an addict nowadays. You can have that digital crack instead of instead of having a real crack. But alpha is the state most people are driving for when they're stressed out in most activities. Like, let's say you were a creative artist or gardening, or you're going for that forest bathing, you're going to get into alpha state because you slow things down. Tai Chi, yoga, these are all states that are going to get the brain out of that problem solving state and into a more creative state. We call that the intuitive mind. When they say you get what you rehearse in life, not what you intend, it's because people who rehearse at alpha have a better chance of producing it in beta, meaning that they rehearse in the lab of their brain or their mind, and then the body, the physiology takes hold of that message and then plays it out for them. Now, theta is very difficult for most people to get into, but as you said, we go in and out of it during sleep, and everyone's experienced it in a hyper state when they are awakening or going to sleep. But theta is really known
Patrick, I think I heard you say once that most people have very little theta waves on EEGs.
Right. Yes,
That's
adults.
Startling.
Yeah. When we've measured over 10,000 brains here in the last, actually 30,000 brains over the last 10 years. And what we found was that most adults, even those that are meditating, they're missing theta. And when my dad was a meditation instructor, we would learn alpha because it's very difficult to get the theta on your own. Now, of course, if you're a master meditator and you've mastered breathing techniques and things, you can get to theta. But the average person out there meditating, they don't get below alpha because they fall asleep as soon as they get to theta. And meditation, of course, isn't sleep. So theta we call the inventive mind, because every inventor in recorded history always had a strategy when they get stressed out in their lab or something would be going on. Like Edison would say that when he had a problem, he would sit with the pan with a spoon in his hand and a pan beneath it, and he would rest until he couldn't hold on to the spoon anymore because it hit the pan and wake him up. And he got that from fighter pilots during World War II, teaching, basically time manipulation, because in these two states of alpha and theta, there's no time. So that's why you can be meditating, and sometimes it might feel like 5 minutes, but it's been 20 minutes, or it might be 20 minutes and it felt like 1 minute. So time is changing, but the inventive mind is really important. It's where deep states of meditation happen, high creativity. And then delta is, unfortunately, we see a lot when you're in a high inflammation state. And I know you write about this a lot in your journals and things that you put out there, but inflammation is a bad problem we have out there. And most people, this chronic low-level stress shows up as inflammation in the brain. So the brain is wanting to shut down. And then the unfortunate thing that people do is they will go out and they'll get coffee, tea, or chocolate. And that's the way they'll stimulate to stay awake, when we have this powerful electrical system occupying between our ears that we can turn on. When you're talking about like Mozart being like a cup of coffee, that's because Mozart is high alpha music, and between alpha and beta, there's actually a brainwave called SMR. So if you're in the category where dementia is a fear or Alzheimer's, that's the brainwave they're missing. So they need to exercise that brainwave. But the one that we now know really is the most important, that they didn't even know about. 20 years ago, if I told you about gamma, they would say, oh, if you have high gamma, you're a schizophrenic, you have all these problems. But now we can measure it. And what I can tell you, Dr. Keith, is that when we've measured healers, super intelligent people, surgeons, high creatives, they all have a high degree of gamma. And we now know that high degree of gamma can actually it's like the bass drum of a band. If you don't have that bass drum going 40 hertz frequency, then the rest of the band falls out of tune. So we need that gamma, but we don't need a lot of it. We need, anywhere between 5 to 7% of our brainwave activity in gamma. But I actually have seen people, I actually at an event we just did in Las Vegas there, we're at the A4M, somebody had 56% gamma. And she was a marketing person. I said, I'd really love to see some of your marketing. It must be just out of this world. And she said, oh yeah, she does all this spacey stuff. She's really thinks outside the box. Gamma is kind of the high, if you want to call it the high octave of theta. Now, there have been people that have actually registered brainwaves up over 180 frequencies per second. That's super high gamma. They actually have a one below delta called epsilon too. But when you talk about the meditators, like people want to think they're a Buddhist monk. Well, they've been meditating their whole life with specialty training, so they can create these higher states of consciousness. What we know with the technology we're talking about today is anyone on this call, after 3 times using the equipment, you'll be visiting these brain waves consistently with the training. Now, once you get the training, the brain learns when to use them the most. So think of brain waves almost like Wi-Fi networks that are healthy, and they tell our body what to do. So theta actually produces a neurotransmitter called GABA. GABA is the precursor to DMT. So if you're the person out there that doesn't dream or doesn't imagine well, I can tell you, if I did a brain scan with you, you would have very little theta. As soon as we train your brain to have more theta, which happens typically within 4 to 6 weeks, you'll begin to visualize, you'll have lucid dreams, you'll experience the kind of opportunity that used to only happen when we were hunters and gatherers. We didn't stay up all night. The average person 100 years ago slept 12 hours a day. Today, the average person sleeps less than 6. So we're not giving our brain a chance to dream or a chance to really get into those hyper states of consciousness. So I hope that explained it for you there.
Yeah, no, that's very masterful. Brilliant. Yeah. Now, the point is, I do have this slightly older demographic. I'm not saying there's nobody on this call under 40, but I know there's a lot of people over 50 on this call. So it's a nice, comforting quote here that, age doesn't really matter. Wherever you start, you can improve. And that's what's really exciting about this. But actually, one of the nicest quotes, I just stumbled across it and I thought that was meant to be, so I picked it up. David Bowie, you know, we all know the pop star, the androgynous, spiky young man. I think it's a really beautiful quote for what was basically a drug-taking rocker, not where you expect the world's deepest wisdom, but look, aging is an extraordinary process where you become the person you always should have been. So I think we can actually attach that as an epithet to the brain tap as well. You know, become more you, basically. So anyway, now I'm going to try and play a video. I say try because, well, oh crap, here we go, guys. See, I touched the mouse and it jumps about 10 at once. I'm hoping, anyway, I'm just going to play a short video from the Consumer Electronics Show, except that I'm not. What's happened? Okay,
where's your link there?
Yeah, I mean, it's not showing the arrow, is it?
No.
Well, never mind. I blew it. We'll improvise. We'll fill in. I mean, it was just it was Patrick's brother Michael being interviewed at the Consumer Electronics Show, and of course the brain tap was a huge hit. Wherever it goes, you know, everyone wants to give it a chance. And I mean, same the other day, wasn't it? A4M. I mean, almost everybody that got in the chair, had a session, came out and whipped out their credit card and said, I want one, because the experience is so profound and so, you know, predictable and repeatable. Of course, that's the exciting part. You can have it happen to you every day. You don't have to wait to get lucky or something like that. All right, now let's talk about a little bit. Well, could you walk us through some or most of these? I think
sure. When I talk here, when I'm talking here, just understand we have studies for all of these things. So what I'm talking about is actually done with real people in real time, with universities backing up what I'm saying, because sometimes people think it can't be that good, or I tried some technology that was similar. I'm the person, my team in Scottsdale, we created this technology. We've had a lot of people imitate us. It's kind of like the thing that says often imitated but never duplicated. We own the proprietary algorithm that does it. So why does it work for pain reduction? Because pain only happens in that beta brainwave. If you have over 45% beta, I'm going to show you somebody has a tendency to have more pain than other people. We all know some people have less pain than others. They have a higher threshold. So we can reduce that beta wave, increase the alpha theta, and the body produces its own natural analgesia. In fact, we have opioid receptors in our brain. And like when my dad took me through surgery, and I had surgery on my shoulder with no anesthetic, he taught me to use what was called a galvanic skin response system using sound to train my brain to go into a deep state of alpha. And I felt no pain. So we always say pain is optional here. So sleep, the way it works for sleep is because of stress, our brainwaves get out of regulation. We actually, when we go to sleep, we go through that phase of drifting down, like Dr. Keith was saying, but then during sleep, we cycle through that sleep cycle 6 to 7 times. But if we're stressed out, what happens is we pop out of that cycle of sleep and we pop back into beta. Most of the problems you're going to hear me say are a beta problem because nobody's taking time to recover. You can't have all the stress that we're under every day, 24/7, without taking time to really relax the brain. And like with children's behaviors, we've in autism, we can kind of put those two together. We noticed that they don't have enough alpha activity and the two hemispheres are not coherent. Your two hemispheres should have matching voltage or energy levels. And what we find when we measure the brain is that when somebody's under stress, their left hemisphere tends to slow down more than the right hemisphere, which is the exact opposite you want to function with. You want your right hemisphere, let's say, of the brain, and whether your right brain or left brain, it's going to kind of switch on you. But you want to have that creative side kind of waiting there to selectively bring you information from the hippocampus. So what happens under stress, though, when you're saying the brain shrinks, they know a stressful year like 2020 can shrink somebody's brain over 3/4 of an inch. Stress has that much influence over it.
Right.
Now with phobias, think of phobias like information coming into a computer. If I try to put too many information, like if I hit the keyboard, I mash it down with all the keys, the computer is going to stop. It's going to freeze up because it doesn't know how to handle all that information at one time. That's what happens with phobias. We get like when somebody sees a spider and freaks out, it's not because that little tiny spider is going to attack them. It's because their brain pictures that little tiny spider becoming a big giant spider like a Saturday matinee, and it's going to consume them. So we have to teach the brain to slow down. And what most people don't realize, Dr. Keith, is that 80% of what we see in our reality is rendered by our subconscious, meaning that life happens so quickly, we're not processing in real time. And the more stressed you are, the more you render or the more you guess at what's going to happen. And we all know we make better decisions if we're not stressed. Panic attacks are preset. So think of, if you can train your brain, one of my favorite sessions that I recommend for people is putting future events into perspective. And especially, I think during 2020 and 2021, people need to do that because nobody's telling people what's going to happen after this. There's a lot of disorder out there, but our brain loves order. It doesn't like the chaos. So, and that's what drives anxiety, right? If you're not certain about what you're going to do, you're going to drive this anxiety feeling. And anxiety, as you said earlier, is basically an over-aroused nervous system, and the body does not know how to regulate it. We know that through meditation, each of our bodies, while I'm standing here talking to you, I'm collecting energy from the room, even if I don't want to. That's just the way our cells work. We all have these things called chromophores on every cell. They're like little batteries, and they take it in from light, sound, and vibration. And if I have too much energy and my body doesn't know how to regulate it, it's going to show up as anxiety, stress, and even can trigger things like schizophrenia. Because if the brain gets so far out of balance, it doesn't know how to process information. And we don't have enough time to go through all of it today, but what we find is that when the brain's balanced, a lot of these problems simply go away. Kind of like when people talk about different natural medicines, when you think about homeopathy, like you're talking about, people go, what do you mean? It's the energy that's making the change. So if we can get people into the right frequency and the right energy, the body knows how to heal itself. We have this innate intelligence that can do that. Mm-hmm. Now, the same thing, what happens when you have traumatic brain injury or PTSD is the brain gets so far out of balance, it forgets what it used to be like. So it thinks that, just to use the idea of PTSD, if you're let's say you're special forces, somebody's shooting at you 24/7, or you're at least even dreaming about it when you're sleeping in your foxhole, and then you get sent home, well, your brain doesn't know how to function. It wants that high level of stress. So for a while you might be okay, but then what happens is you start building that stress into your life because they haven't trained the brain to down regulate. And that's the real key here. The same with traumatic brain injury. We have the only time that our brain detoxes. And the one thing that we did, we just finished a study, Dr. Keith, that we're going to be publishing. We studied the effects of brain tapping for 1 year with a school in Michigan. And we took half the students that had concussions. The doctors gave them all care. So nobody didn't get care, but half of them used brain tap. The other half didn't. The half that used brain tap, 100% of the people that used brain tap had over 50% better results in all neurological areas: pain reduction, sleeping better, no headaches, all the things that you would expect. The people that didn't do the brain fitness part of their training, they would have those basically negative side effects. And that's where, when we talk about the migraines or the addictions, when you take a rubber band and you wrap it around your finger and your finger starts to hurt, that's what I tell people, that's what's going on in your head. You're not getting blood flow and circulation. If you're not getting blood flow and circulation, and there could be a lot of reasons for that, but if it's simply that, what light does is through the eyes and ears, which we'll talk a little bit about, I think, is we're going to actually feed the brain the most powerful nutrient that most people aren't getting, and that's light. When Dr. Cousins talked about the most powerful nutrient on earth being light energy, like getting outside and getting light lit up from the sun, but most of us can't do that enough. So we're going to do it through closed eyelids and through the ears, through the auricular points. And then when we look at addictions, and then we know there's lots of other things. We have over 1,400 different sessions, and some of them have different versions of them. So there's over 2,000 sessions on our platform. But addiction is that's near and dear to my heart because my dad was an addict. He was an alcoholic, and this is what helped him. Not specifically the full light and sound experience, but using the binaural beats, the isochronic tones, learning to relax with something called the Silva method. And that's what started my journey at 12 years old. So what we find with addicts, they're not getting high to get high. usually most addicts are getting high to get balanced. And what they find is for a brief moment, they have that moment of euphoria where they have that balance. And then unfortunately, they took one drink too many, one Coke too many, one pill too many, one injection too many. And because they can't control it when you use outside forces. You know, they say you can break an egg from the outside, but you bring life. You know, they say you kill life from the outside with an egg if you break it from the outside, right? The bird doesn't last. But if the bird breaks it from the inside, now we have life. So the same thing's true with our consciousness and our brain. We need to activate this powerful brain that we have. And when you're talking about any age, I want to make sure the listeners know we've done studies with people that are over 100 years old, and they were still getting between 29 and 30% or 35% neurological improvement from just one session of brain tap. So we found that it doesn't matter what age you are. Your brain can learn and retrain and improve at any age.
Brilliant. Gosh, that's a very profound walkthrough on this slide, Patrick. Thank you so much. Right, so no doubt you're interested in, I want one of these. We want to tell you what, you know, if that's okay with you, just spend 15 minutes or 10, 15 minutes explaining how you can get yourself one of these. And I've got some very tasty deals to explain to you. This is basically the device that we call the headset, that you wear it and it's got sounds in the ear and it's got visuals, the flashing lights that drive that. This headset, you can buy the headset on its own. You don't have to have a more expanded package. Typically, that, and it's a very, you know, the latest one is a very sophisticated device. You need to provide your own audio files if you're going to do it this way, but then you probably have a, you know, maybe you've got a tablet full of those. Normally, this would be $647, but just because of this webinar and for the next 7 days, you can buy it for a considerable discount, just $497 if you want to do it that way. There's another option. In fact, I want to tell you more about this. Just a minute. I've just realized there's something else to say about this option. Talk us through this, Patrick. Most people won't know Paul Nogier, but just give them enough to make it exciting.
Yeah. Well, what we noticed was we have about 2,400 clinics right now using BrainTap as a clinical solution, and they were using lasers in the ear for stop smoking, weight reduction, different addictions. And I said, wow. So what we did is we did research in the lab. And we said, what if we use the Nogier frequency that turns off the sympathetic overload and turns on parasympathetic? And we were bathing the ear in the light, because all the blood goes into the ear. So we can do something called photobiomodulation, which is a pretty big buzzword out there in the medical world right now. And we can feed that light throughout the body. But one of the nice things is the ears are part of the way the brain regulates heat and cooling in the brain. So the blood goes through the ears every 4 to 5 minutes, where the rest of the body, it takes about 45 seconds. So you get a good chance to do some blood doping, we would call it, with light. And what people find is that they might have pain disorders, they might have skin disorders, arm and shoulder aches. You can see all those, because every part of the body is represented in the ear. And people who are an iridologist, when they do this ear acupuncture, they can use needles or lasers, like I said. They can use seeds. And what we chose to do was, even though the lights would appear to be solid when you look at our headset, that light is actually flickering at very specific frequencies that are instructing the body to turn off its sympathetic drive, which is the fight or flight, and turn on that relaxation response and get that thriving brain back working again. So it's something that no one else does. This is one of the things we found that really works with children, but we also found that for people that are in such pain that they're not able to do it on their own, this is one of the ways we can shut off that pain signal and get them to have less pain.
Now, for anyone who thinks this is totally weird, let me tell you about a friend of mine who pinched this part of it. You can see that if you look on the lower right-hand side, lower jaw and upper jaw. She just pinched here hard and sat through the dentist drilling out a whole tooth, drilling and filling. And you know, that agony that can be. She didn't feel a thing, except at one moment she thought, is this really true? She let go and it really hurt. So she grabbed again and it went numb again. The man was called Paul Nogier, and it's a very brilliant discovery. And the fact that the brain taps in on that, as it were, is pretty awesome. I think it's terrific. Okay, so I just want to make that point. So the headset on its own is perhaps even more sophisticated than you might think. But now let's look at what we call the power user. Now, that's the term you use, isn't it, back at the shop, as it were, Patrick, for,
Yes.
you know, doctors and practitioners. They can get all the good stuff. Wasn't that available to the public, but tonight, and I don't know for how many people, but certainly as a result of this webinar and anybody with us, and for the next 7 days, you could get access to all of this stuff, all of it. And as Patrick said, there's over 2,000 tracks now, so that's an awful lot of stuff that you can listen to. You will need some way of playing it, which you get your own device, but you can collect it from the web by having the app. And of course, you pay for the privilege, but it's pretty good. You can run it on 2 devices with up to 5 plays per device per day. I don't think it can be much fairer than that, really, just as much as you want, in other words.
Right.
Any of the tracks that you want, but you will need the app to connect with that. Now, I think I'm going to put the question in at the beginning, but we've already had a couple of emails, apparently, Patrick. Do I need the app? Can I not just, play the track? But you need the app to get online, to get the tracks down. I mean, it's 2,000 tracks. You can't download them onto your phone.
Yeah, and the reason, if I can just explain, there's something called neuroplasticity. And even though you might like a track, we need to change that up, because if you listen, it's kind of like going to the gym. If you do the same workout, you're going to find that you're going to hit a plateau. So we recommend you change out, doing something different all the time. The more varied you can be, the more your brain will train. We learn through stress, but it can be a pleasant stress, like a eustress, not a negative stress. So that's what we're doing. So that's why you need to have all the sessions. So you're always listening to something new and different, and really giving the brain that time to expand and work for you instead of against you.
So variety, critical. So, all right, so the abundance of choices is really an almost necessary part of the story. Yeah, that's great. Okay, so now let's look at the full deal. Now, I've got to say that, over 95% of people would choose this option because it's having the whole business in your hand. You can download, you can have the app which will work on a tablet or, a smartphone, those things, but you've got the headset too. They talk to one another with Bluetooth. I've just realized, I think I missed a slide somewhere. Anyway, somewhere there was a slide of a cable connector. I think I missed it, Patrick. I'm not.
No, it might be coming up in a minute, I think.
But anyway, anyone will understand what I say when, you can cord connect the two, or you can Bluetooth connect the two, and you get all of these tracks, as it said before. And again, available on two devices, 5 plays per device per day. And the saving is, it should cost hundreds of dollars. And in fact, it's $180. Well, in fact, less than that, isn't it, if you buy the bundle? Anyway, I'm waffling. Let's just say the whole deal, the whole 9 yards, the headset, the app, and all that goes with it. It's got, normally the price would be over $1,000, well, over $1,100, look. But now, tonight, and for the next 7 days, as a result of this webinar and you being here, we can offer you the whole thing for $597. And honestly, having been walked through all that science and all those good things by Dr. Patrick, it's one of those, why wouldn't you, really? I think everyone needs some help in this day and age. Listen, we've got electronic overload. So what's wrong with the idea of having electronic protection? Surround yourself with a force field, as the science fiction writers would say. So you've got this impenetrable barrier where things can't hit on you and hurt you too much. Okay, so those are the 3 choices. Let me, I think I've got a summary slide here. We can run through them again if you like. Oh, yes, I didn't say this, but well, we said it in one way or the other, but not just 2,000 tracks, but what? Well, there's sleep, there's weight wellness, general optimal health. There's one, I'm talking about a bundle of tracks. One is called Stress-Free Me, which is the one I like. Worry-Free Me, children and learning. Now, that's a big one. You've heard Dr. Patrick say that kids benefit enormously from this. There's bundles on nutrition, public speaking. It's not here, but don't you have one on flying or fear of flying or something?
Yes, yeah, we have a phobia program.
Nervous flyer, get yourself the package and start playing it, and it will change how you feel and how you react to airplane. So we've got stop smoking, and we've got weight loss. Accelerated learning is an important one. People do well. I don't know. Have I got a minute for Georgi Lozanov? He was a Bulgarian teacher, and he used alpha brain states to train people. He didn't have a device like this. I'm going back 40 odd years. I mean, we didn't have it before because it's taken Panasonic and Sony to come up with personalized stereos so that you can create binaural. It wasn't possible 40 or 50 years ago. But Georgy Lozanov was a brilliant teacher. In summary, he was able to teach his students to learn 1,100 new foreign language words a day. And most people would say, what, over 1,000 words a day? Yeah, but they'd forget them, wouldn't they? No, they didn't. The immediate after test, they scored 94% retention, but 2 years later, they still had 80% plus retention. That's the power of this kind of brain technology that we're talking about in the field of learning. In fact, Georgy Lozanov's name is now more or less totally associated with accelerated learning. Anyway, lots more of those, Anna Patrick, and plus some good stuff by me. You know, my tracks, I gather, are quite popular. Patrick's wife loves them.
Yes.
But, you know, I've got A Journey to Avalon, you know, the old mythical paradise where King Arthur came from. Tour of the Universe, Atlantis, you know, Atlantis. Well, I won't spoil a secret, but let's just say I know where it is, and a lot of people now know where it is, and it wasn't a continent on Earth ever. But other good stuff, you know, like loving and gratitude and forgiveness, all these good things. They're all there, and it's all available for you. You can download as many tracks as you want, play them as often as you want, although don't forget variety, as Dr. Patrick was saying, very important. Okay, so it's time to make a choice right now. So the headset only, you could get just the headset, and that will cost you $497. If you want option 2, that's the power user bundle. It's $180 a year. And you can keep that going for as long as you want. But look, I think it's almost a no-brainer. The best choice is the headset plus the power user bundle, well, plus the app bundle, I should say. You'll have to renew the bundle every year, but you buy the first 12 months, you buy it anyway by ordering yourself the set. And look, it's $597. It's only like $100 more than just buying the headset on its own. I mean, I think really it's a bit crazy not to. Anyway, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the chat box to type in a live link. If you've decided, we're going to do question and answers in a minute, right? I'm not saying this is the end. We've got Q&A, and I'm sure there'll be lots of questions about this wonderful subject, my very clever guest. But if you want to go and do something, want to nail one, go to braintap.com and /Dr. Keith. Now that's all in lowercase letters. After the .com, it's always case sensitive. You can't put capital letters in there, all lowercase. All right, so if you give me a minute, as I said, I'll put that into the chat box. Everyone will then be able to see it. braintap.com /Dr. Keith. And the point of that, having now clicked it, it's a live link. You can just click on that and go straight to the website and do whatever. Okay, so what I'm going to do now throughout the Q&A, I'm going to leave up the next screen, which is just, oh, hang on. No, I'm not. We've got some more science, haven't we? I forgot. Let's do a bit more science, Patrick. You know, while people are clicking through and some people perhaps making up their minds what to do or which set to get, shall we say. But you startled me a couple of times. You said, you know, after just one session with the Brain Tap, you got some amazing improvements. I mean, look at these. This is pretty startling, isn't it? That just...
Right. When here in America, we were asked to speak at the National Institute of Health's neurological symposium, and we were presented these results, and they're like blown away. And then we let them do it because at the events, you know, we have our neuro check where people can actually come over and get it done for themselves. So, you know, this was done with women 55, 65 years old and not meditators, no meditators. These were people that just, you know, basically off the street, that they weren't professional relaxation people, you know, or yogis, you know, and doing that. So anybody can do this very quickly because the body learns by these frequency responses. The body matches that response and relaxes.
Right. No, we've talked about sleep a lot, just to mention it again. But what's this heart rate variability? Explain why I put this down here as the #1 health measure. In many ways it is, but why?
Well, we now know that there are actually 3 brains in the body, not just the one between our ears. We have brain cells in our heart, they call them neutrino cells, 4,000 cells, that they now know communicates more to the brain between our ears than the brain between our ears does to our heart. It actually runs the show. So if there's coherence they now say it's the gold standard for health. That's why all the smart devices have them. Of course, there's better measurements, with your doctors and things, but also your gut is actually part of that equation as well. Because if your heart's not in it, that's why there's more heart attacks on Monday morning than any other day of the week. When you talked about that stress study and work being a major form of stress, the heart is a big measurement. And now they're finding, when they started the cosmonaut program, actually the Russians are pretty much the ones who really went to town with the heart rate variability for their cosmonaut program, because we can't put EEG devices up in space. People putting the GUI like a skull cap on and measuring the 16 points of the brain, but we can get what they call ECG. We can now get brainwave information from the heart information. So science is getting way beyond what, when I was growing up, we didn't even have CRT screens. So, now we're looking at LCD screens and what we're doing. So the science is moving way ahead, and we can now measure. And what we mean by this, the heart rate measurement, is you can tell in advance when you have a poor variability. That doesn't mean you're going to die today, but it means, hey, you better, this is a time to get going. So now you can tell, what am I doing today? Am I exercising, eating well, getting sunlight, all those things? You're going to see that heart rate variability go up, and your health score is going to go up. It's a big, super measurement.
Big deal, yeah. And we've been talking about sympathetic versus parasympathetic. Parasympathetic is the good one on the whole. That's the eat, sleep, relax, and repair. Tissue repair and rebuilding, that only takes place in a parasympathetic state. Your body is not bothered about repairing itself if you're running away from a saber-toothed tiger. It'll do that later when you calm down and relax. And okay, as it says, you enjoy the destination and the journey. Bit more science, and then we'll get to the Q&A. So Dr. Vincent Jimpapa, MD, he studied the effect between these different brainwave patterns that we've been talking about, alpha, theta, and delta particularly, and the beneficial effects on three important hormones: cortisol, which is often called the stress hormone; DHEA, which is the precursor of all kinds of stuff, including estrogen, testosterone, so the sex hormones, but also plenty of cholesterol, and all those things are all chemically related to DHEA. It's a big, it's a sort of mother molecule. And melatonin, which we all know is sleep and relaxation, but it's also a powerful anti-aging remedy. And look at the effects that Dr. Jimpapa found. After just 3 days of use of this technology, the average increase in DHEA levels was over 40%. Several people had increases up to 90%. Cortisol came down an average of 46%, but some people had 70-80% reduction. I mean, that's life-saving levels. If you can get your stress hormones down by that much, you're doing good. And the melatonin boost, the average was almost double, look, 97.77%, almost 100%. But some of the subjects had 100%, 200%, even 300% increase in their melatonin levels. So it's kind of QED, really, the summary. So the combination of all these four major modality stimulus, sound, sight, voice, and music, combined together as they are in the brain tap, can make these beneficial shifts very rapid and very predictable. You can actually measure them. You can do repetitive studies. It's always coming out the same. The results are the same over and over and over. It is the nearest we've got to miracle technology, I would say. Okay, so I'm going to leave the link while we talk and while we do Q&A. But what I'm going to do is stop that recording so that people who don't want to watch all the Q&A don't have to, but I'll restart it for the Q&A too. Meaning what? Where am I? Here we go. No, wait a minute. That didn't work. Lost the screen share, haven't I? I think I've even worse. I think I've lost the screen share. I didn't mean to do that. Oh, crumbs.